This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. In this episode, I speak with Mark Bowden about body language techniques, physical triggers, and how to move on purpose. Enjoy this episode. Hey, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Mark Bowden. Mark Bowden is a keynote speaker for organizations worldwide whose work depends upon winning the hearts and minds of others. His talks take you on an exciting and humorous journey to understand how, with the right body language, it's often not what you say, but how you say it that gets results. An expert in human behaviour and body language, Mark is the creator of TRUTHPLANE, a communication training company and unique methodology for anyone who has to communicate with impact to an audience. And it's my great pleasure to have Mark with us today. Welcome, Mark.
Hey there, James. Thanks so much for having me in this conversation with you.
So share with our listeners what's going on in your world just now.
Ooh, right. Well, right now, most of my attention is going into the fourth book called Truth and Lies, which is about the power to know what people are really thinking, no matter what they're saying. So it's a bit of a departure for me. Obviously, it's still in the world of body language, but it's the book that I said I'd never write, which is the one on reading body language rather than using body language to influence and persuade others. It's really about trying to work out now how others might unwittingly be influencing and persuading your view of them through the body language that you're receiving from them and the assumptions really that you make about them. So actually it's truly a book about critical thinking and how to think about the assumptions that you're making about other people. So that's what I'm really focused on right now. There's it comes out in 2018, but I got to get it finished by the end of July.
And how did you get started on this journey into wanting to kind of learn about body language, understanding communication more broadly as well, and human behavior?
Yeah, so I'm hearing from your accent, James, that you're probably from England, like me, or somewhere in Britain. Yeah, and so you probably remember the work of Sir David Attenborough. Yeah. And these fantastic nature documentaries that he'd make, and I was fascinated by the natural world, especially aquatic, especially the sea, and the creatures in the sea and how they moved and the behaviours that they had, and so then a little bit later, Desmond Morris came on the scene with his book Man Watching, which was a field guide to human behavior. And so I got even more interested in, why do human beings do what they do? Why do they behave in the way they behave? Why do we have this effect on each other? And I'm just fascinated by this area. And so it's really just been a journey from then on in trying to understand human behavior, why we do what we do, and how we might be able to have some influence over each other around that.
It was interesting. The other day I was in a hotel somewhere, and there was some political debating going on the TV or on a TV show, and I switched the volume off. And I was trying to get a sense of like the what the people were saying and what my feelings were about each of these people, just with the volume off, just kind of watching their body language, knowing that I was speaking to you today, and it just impacted like how powerful body language is and how subliminal. So what's you speak a lot about the evolutionary side of why body language is so important. Can you talk about that? What's going on there in an evolutionary perspective?
Yeah, so there's a part of our brain which, if we take evolution as given, is 500 million years old. We call it often the brain stem or the R complex or the reptilian brain or the primitive brain. But essentially that part of the brain is trying to work out, is the environment a good one or a bad one for us? Should we approach the environment that we're in, or should we remove ourselves from it, avoid it, essentially? Now, it's getting the majority of the data that it needs to use in order to make this quick heuristic decision from the visual world. It's relying primarily on what it's seeing and to an extent on what it's hearing and touching and tasting and smelling. But let's just say it's not relying on language for this. And that's why when you switch that TV off and you take the language away, you're still experiencing the feelings of attraction towards the people who are speaking to you or behaving in front of you, or repulsion, this movement away, this idea of, do we trust them or do we mistrust them? Is it a good environment which they're part of, or is it a bad environment? So, I'm using this evolutionary behavioral psychology all the time as a model to explain why certain triggers, physical triggers, will have such a big effect on an audience when you're speaking or presenting, for example, or especially leading or selling, and why some of the language that you might use, though you think it's going to be important in making a big difference, actually has very little impact.
Well, I watched a video of you the other day where you kind of walked through a door and you started speaking, but you had your hands behind you. And so you couldn't see your hands as you were kind of talking. And I was watching it and sensing like what the feeling in me was about you as a speaker by that. And you then started talking about how something as simple as that, the hand movement. So first of all, what do you think that someone like me was maybe experiencing when I couldn't see your hands? And what are some of the evolutionary reasons behind that?
Yeah, so there's a very simple heuristic that the primitive brain uses in order to judge, is an environment good or is it bad? And we're always part of the environment. And the heuristic says, if insufficient data, always default to a negative. So if I can't see something, then do not be an optimist about it. In fact, be a pessimist. In fact, the less you can see, the more cataclysmically pessimistic you should be. So simply, if I put my hands behind my back, it will cause your primitive brain to have insufficient data about whether I have a tool or a weapon, anything in my hands that might be able to harm you or help you, by the way. But because there's insufficient data, you don't jump to an optimistic view, you jump to a pessimistic view. And I think that you would have experienced a sense of skepticism around me, a sense of negativity, not being optimistic, being more pessimistic about the message and the content I had for you. And that's what's really important, is your feeling that is produced by my behavior. Your feeling is imposed upon whatever content, leadership, salesmanship I might be performing with you. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. Is it possible to play with that? I mean, I think about, let's say, a movie where I think it was a 2001 Space Odyssey, where it has an opening scene and it uses this music which is very different from the scene that's kind of going on, or sometimes you'll juxtaposition the music that's going on with the actual scene as well. When it comes to body language, what happens if, let's say, I'm saying one thing in one type, so let's say a very aggressive, but my body is very, relaxed and opening. What happens in the brain of the person that's watching this and listening to this?
Oh, well, so the brain defaults to the picture. It trusts the picture more than it ever trusts the language. So what will happen is, if you have the body of relaxation, then the brain goes, okay, relaxed, and that may be a good thing, or the brain may become indifferent to you. It may go, oh, too relaxed, not even bothered about what he's saying, therefore pay no attention. So I might not even hear your aggressive words, because the body did nothing to tell me if you were a friend, an enemy, a potential mate. So now I've just got to be indifferent to you. So in that specific case of a relaxed body, I may become indifferent to you and never hear a word that you say. Or actually, I might join you in that relaxation. And so I might be very relaxed about the aggressive things that you're saying. But again, not take them as being particularly aggressive. I might even think you're having a bit of a joke, because the juxtaposition is enough for it to seem kind of humorous to me. So there's a number of ways that it might go. But the important thing to remember here is, I'm going to pay more attention to your body as the indicator of truth than what you're saying. For us human beings, the truth is always in the body, not in the words. Now, having said that, you can decide the behaviors you use. So that's not necessarily that because somebody's doing something with their body, it's how they actually think and feel. They may well be producing those behaviors on purpose, and that's what we'd call conscious influence and persuasion.
So let's talk about conscious influence and persuasion. Let's imagine with someone, whether they're a great speaker. I mean, you speak all over the world as a keynote speaker, or it's a leader of an organization and getting up on stage, or it's a great musician. It's a music artist is getting up on stage. What are some of the things that you see that the good ones do in order to very quickly build trust and credibility through their body language?
Well, let's take this as an example, because I know beforehand you were letting me into a little secret of your own, which is just at the weekend you saw Obama speak, which is a great speaker. No, regardless of what you think of his politics, whether you like them or dislike them, it's very hard not to accept that he's a fantastic orator. And one of the things he's doing on purpose is very, very open body language. Yeah, if you look at his gestures, they're big, wide, big open palm gestures. And many of his gestures are open palm gestures at exactly navel height, the area that I call in my model of body language, the truth plane. Because when you gesture, very big open gestures at navel height, people's primitive brains are triggered to trust you more, to feel that your content is more credible, more trustworthy, more honest, more truthful. Now, that doesn't mean it is, because, of course, you can and often should do this on purpose if you want your audience to be attracted towards you, to see you so you stand out. If you want to win trust and you want to gain credibility every time you speak, as you probably want to think about performing these, because otherwise you're going to rely on your natural, instinctual, authentic behavior, which when you get in front of more than 5 people and you don't know them, you'll start a fight and flight process. You'll start a process that is a retreat or an advance aggressively response, because you don't know, especially if they have power, what they're going to do, how they're going to respond to you. 5 is a big enough number for the primitive brain that it just goes 1, 2, 3, 4 lots. So it sees a gang of people, and you will go into some kind of mild or actually quite big, depending on the people involved, stress response. So a lot of what I teach people, leaders, including prime ministers of G8 powers, what I'm teaching them is the countermeasures for their own authentic stress responses.
So when you mention these leaders of G8 powers, for example, so that's where you're maybe speaking to someone and train them, and they're maybe from a different culture. So these evolutionary psychology, these triggers and the things that are going on in that part of the brain, I'm guessing then that the culture doesn't really matter, or does it? Does culture have a difference in terms of the way that you want to be using your body, whether you're up on stages or whether you're meeting someone face to face?
Sure. So for the brainstem, the reptilian brain, 500 million years old, that was formed actually in organisms that are not social mammals. Reptiles are not social mammals, so they don't have, or the majority of them, couple do, but the majority of reptiles do not have a limbic system, a social mammalian brain. They have only pretty much a brainstem, and that brainstem is pretty much the same architecture as my brainstem, your brainstem, somebody who was born on the continent of Africa, their brainstem, somebody who was born on the continent of North America, their brainstem, somebody who was born on the island of Hawaii, their brainstem, regardless of the culture, regardless of where you were born, regardless of what you might think your race is, the brainstem of you and I are exactly the same. There's some small genetic code differences which are about our individual cells belonging to a different organism, but in terms of the architectural structure, it's the same, which means our behaviors will ultimately be similar when we're put into different situations. Now, the cultural brain, though, the social mammalian brain, that if it has a blood supply going to it, that may be able to suppress some of the instincts. It may actually allow some of the instincts even more room. That tends to be what culture does. Culture tends to amplify or suppress certain things. So a different culture may initiate or suppress different behaviors or different responses to signals out there. But if you put the person under enough stress, that part of the brain will have blood supply taken from it, and you're back to primitive brain, reptilian brain behaviors. I hope that explanation makes some clarity around that.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. You mentioned, that there's a kind of fight and flight thing going on. I think, when I speak in places like Thailand, for example, where the head is somewhere you don't touch someone's head. It's just like absolute kind of no culturally. But I'm guessing that if I think back, there must be an evolutionary thing going on there. It's like it's amplifying. The cultural thing is amplifying an evolutionary thing because it's delicate for one. And so if you don't know someone, it's like it's probably not the place you want to touch really. So there's those things kind of going on there as well. What if I kind of took the absolute opposite and I wanted to go up on stage and I wanted to look distrustful and I wanted to look like I lacked credibility and that I wasn't going to be confident and strong. What would I do with my body in order to do that?
Oh, very simple. Just do lots of closed and concealing body language. Minimize your body, so make it as small as you possibly can. Close off the audience's sight lines to as much of you as you can, and cover as much as you can damage points on the body, sensitive areas of the body, kill points on the body. So use your hands to cover over your throat and carotid arteries, cover over the stomach area, primary sexual characteristics as well. Minimize your body, do all of that, and a lot of people will just actually walk out because they already know this is going to be terrible. This guy has zero confidence and looks like he's sick, ill, and about to shrivel up on stage. Do that, and I can pretty much guarantee you'll fail miserably.
What about, you also work with people in sales and management who have to build relationships very, very fast, maybe just one-on-one or very small groups. Sometimes I've been in those rooms where people have come into me and they just have it's difficult to explain, like a charisma to them. They're able to connect very, very quickly, in a very open way. And I've often wondered, well, what are they doing with their body? Obviously, there's things that they're saying, but what are some of the things that you teach in terms of helping salespeople specifically, build that relationship very, very quickly?
Yeah, so it's very much as I've been talking about, open body language, especially open hands in the truth plane at navel height, being very direct as well. So having an objective and getting to that objective in as clear a way as possible. I'm talking about a physical objective here. So decide, for example, where it is you want to sit and go directly there and sit. So people's brains went, oh, okay, she sat. They're not going, what are they doing? Where are they sit? Oh, they're sitting or not? Are you getting out your lap? Oh, you're not getting out your laptop. Any confusion will cause a default to negativity. Yeah, the primitive brain does not want life to be a crossword puzzle. It wants it to be clear, consistent, and easy to get. And if you are clear and consistent and easy to get, you will come across as charismatic. Put likable with that. So again, open, clear body language, a smile, maybe a gentle smile on your face, giving the signal that everything is good now, then that's going to get close to what many people feel is charismatic.
And in your own work, you're now working on this next book, and you're in the research for it. But can you tell us about a time where you had this kind of light bulb moment in your own work, an insight where you maybe went, oh, okay, this is the direction I want to be going with my writing and my work, my speaking. Can you talk to us about one of those moments in your life?
Yeah, so I guess it was really about looking at people's presentation, especially in politics and business, and realizing that it was their non-verbal skills that were going to have the biggest impact on their verbal message. And the majority of people on the planet had no understanding of how to move on purpose to a set result. So they didn't know just how impactful body language was on the verbal message, and they weren't used to deciding their body language on purpose. So they had no control and no vocabulary. Now imagine you trying to use verbal language if you had no control and no vocabulary. How effective do you think you'd be? And so most people spend a lot of time going, well, I'm going to get a lot of control over my verbal language and more vocabulary. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a great thing to do. Yeah, I absolutely advocate that. The light bulb moment comes when you realize that it's your behavior and the environment around that verbal message that will have most impact on what people think you're talking about, what you mean, what you feel and intend towards them. And the majority of people on the planet, especially in business and politics, where they could have a lot of impact, they have no vocabulary and no control. And so I came to this area going, I will focus on providing that non-verbal skill to this audience so people pay more attention to them, they stand out, they're trusted immediately. Within microseconds, that feeling of trust is there, and an audience feel that their content is now credible, and they haven't even heard any of the content.
And as you say this, I think, all the time, whether it's as speakers or politicians or business people looking to sell and working on presentations, you spend all this time refining your actual presentation, the slides, or what you're going to say. And if you just took an almost probably zero time on the body movements and everything, and obviously you see great actors actually spend a lot of time that they're working their beats. They know where they need to be at a certain point. They know how they want to use themselves, the physicality of themselves. They know how they want to be in the space and their connection to the other people around them. They're much more nuanced in how they do that. But it seems like, we're in election season just now in the UK as we're recording this. It seems like very few of the politicians actually spend any time on any of this stuff.
Yeah, so I've not been over there training them. So I've been spending my time in other countries, and yeah, I mean, you'll be seeing it yourself and be thinking, well, if only they were presenting this content better, I would think better of the content. Yeah, and it's interesting you're talking about actors there, because yes, what an actor is hopefully thinking about is the effect that they want to get and the action they need to do in order to have that effect. Remember, actors are called actors because they do action, not because they do thinking. That's for philosophers. And so, as an actor, they should be thinking all the time, what's the effect that I want to have, and then have a vocabulary of behaviors to pick from in order to get that effect, even if that effect is an emotion, is a feeling, is a thinking process, because that can be got to through action, not through thinking, philosophy. Certainly the best actors that I've seen, they're doers, not thinkers when they're on stage or when they're on the film set or in front of the camera in some way. They're not in the point of performance thinking about what they're doing. They're now just doing it. They're not thinking about how they'll have an emotion. They're having an emotion. They're embodying a real, true emotion because they've done the action or responded to others' actions in a way that will get to that objective of having the feeling.
So I'm guessing there's many listeners just now, maybe some politicians amongst them, who will be listening to this saying, okay, I need to work on this stuff. One of the online online course in addition to books is called Presentation Genius. And I was just checking it out earlier. So what is that course and how does that work? And how can that help on some of the things we've just been speaking about?
Yeah, so if you go to presentationgenius.com, so just think about the word presentation genius, put it in Google, up will come. There is, close to maybe 6.5 hours of video content in really short episodes of how to run meetings, how to present, how to facilitate. But it's really about how to set up the right environments, how to create the right processes, the right environments, including your body language, that will get you to the objective of people, seeing you, understanding you're credible, giving you trust. But in Presentation Genius, get them getting to the results that you want them to get to. I think whenever you present, whenever you facilitate, whenever you're running a meeting, you need to have an objective in mind, some change that you want those participants or that audience to go through, some objective that you want them to reach. And again, what's easy to do is just go, well, what content am I going to give them? And, how am I going to get that content on my PowerPoint? Instead of going, how do I construct an environment that they can be in with me, whereby they're obviously going to get to the results that we need, because that environment takes them down that route. It persuades them, it influences them, it takes them on the right emotions and thinking process. So that's what Presentation Genius is about. And if you're interested in that, just head over to presentationgenius.com and take a look.
And while we're on the subject of online resources and courses, are there any online resources or tools or mobile apps like Evernote that you love and you find really useful for your own work as a writer and as a communications expert?
Oh, wow. As a writer, I don't think I'd get anywhere without Google Documents. I think, I just don't know where I'd be, because as a writer, I really do have to collaborate with people. I'm dyslexic, so the first drafts of whatever I write can easily be unintelligible to the majority of human beings on the planet. Not to me. I always completely understand it, but other readers can have a big problem in what I've written. So I have to bring in collaborators. So on the current book that I'm writing, Truth and Lies, Tracy Thompson is writing that with me. Not only helping and contributing in a huge way to the content in there, but also turning what I've written into stuff that other human beings would have a little more understanding of as well. I've also got some of the other top, I think, really the top body language experts in the world to contribute to Truth and Lies. So again, having Google Documents means you can get them involved in actually what's written there. They can really feel a part of it rather than, an outside contributor just passing stuff through you. So I can actually involve them in the documents. So I love that Google world because it's very collaborative. It's a great place for a team to be.
Absolutely. And if you were to recommend just one book and one record, one album to our listeners, what would they be?
Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to make that recommendation, but I am going to recommend a film. So I'm going to put that together, that record and that book, and call it a film. And I would suggest people go and watch Orson Welles' probably his last film. It was a documentary. It's called F is for Fake. F is for Fake. You can actually watch it on YouTube. It's a brilliant documentary about the forger Elmir Dahori. But what it's actually about is ideas around truth and lies and authenticity. and how I think you don't have to be yourself. You can actually be somebody even greater than yourself if you're prepared to understand this idea of that a fake is as good as the real thing.
Yeah.
And that's what I think comes out of F is for fake. And the reason it's important, I think, for people is that you have to it helps you understand that you can choose your behaviors and get the results that you want. And there is nothing wrong about that. Anybody who says, well, you're not being authentic, they're frankly limiting themselves. I would suggest that actually this idea of authenticity is one of the largest cons of the last decade.
It's funny because it's I heard someone speaking about it recently at a speaker event, and I've always been, that word authenticity has just never sat particularly right, and I'm never quite sure what it was. And I think you've kind of pointed on the path to it, which is it's limiting. And there was a great documentary the other day about Italian artist, whose name I can't remember now, who spent the last 20 years building a huge profile, lots of interviews. But actually what they found out, that he put in a double for himself to do all the interviews. So this person, he knows his work exactly and knows a lot of the inspiration. But he just said, well, I want to get on with working and creating. If I have to do all of these interviews as well, so there you go. That's not authentic. But what it does do is, what it's also partly doing is it's partly going into the perceptions that we have of what an artist is. And he made sure that the actor that plays him looks like an actor, looks like the actor that the media would like to see, like the artist the media would like to see. Meanwhile, he can get on and creating his wonderful art. So I agree with you on the authenticity. It's a strange one. It seems to be very in vogue just now, and I don't quite get it. But that's a wonderful recommendation. F is for fake by
and I love that story that you've just told me there. I'm going to investigate that as well. Reminds me very much of Banks's exit through the gift shop as well.
Exactly.
So I'm going to take a look at that. I'm excited by that.
Well, we'll put a link to this F is for fake by Orson Welles as well. And final question for you, Mark. Let's imagine you woke up tomorrow morning and you had to start from scratch. So you have all the tools of your trade, all the knowledge, all the skills that you've acquired over the years, but you know no one knows you. What would you do? How would you restart?
Yeah, so I'd feel in a pretty good position actually for a start, just because I've got all my knowledge and I've got my tools, which is great. So the only thing I'm lacking now is an audience or a client. That's all I need, is somebody who I can transfer the knowledge to, and most importantly, help. So the first thing I would do is go out and find somebody, anybody, to help, and start that process of building that base of people who you help. And so what I love about that question, James, is for me it really helps me understand what my business is about, which is I just need to help people find an audience and transfer that knowledge.
And for people that listen to you just now, so we mentioned Presentation Genius, but maybe people want help from a consulting or finding other things that you're involved in and projects you're working. What's the best way for them to connect with you and find out more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So just get over to truthplane.com, TRUTHPLANE, truthplane.com. You'll find me there. You'll find the consulting there. You can engage me for keynotes there. There's a contact form on there, which will come straight to the office, and I'll get back to you very quickly around that. But hang around the site, because there's plenty of video there and plenty more help around there.
Well, thank you, Mark, so much for coming on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I don't think I'll ever think about body language in the same way again. So I'm going to go and review all my speaking videos and with the sound off and see what happens. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks, James, for having me. Great interview. Really appreciate it.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.